Um, Welcome everybody. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. We are really happy to see a bunch of people joining the call and helping us kick off 2025 with the Puerto Rico Energy Forum. We've got a couple of housekeeping items that Tom and I will lay out for this year and really for the next coming weeks. We had last week our Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes segment. That's our monthly news blast where we have an invited guest and we're unpacking the last month of news related to energy in Puerto Rico, and news about energy in general that can impact the island. We had Ignacio Diaz from Glenn International join us talking about a whole loaded list of news items from changing local and federal administrations to bankruptcy proceedings to Energisa and discussions to extend AES's contract. A lot of things that make a big difference or could potentially make a big difference for the energy landscape here in Puerto Rico. We have recorded that session, as we do with all of our segments, and we'll be posting that later today and sharing that via email and LinkedIn with everybody. We're also going to be starting this year a newsletter. We're calling it the Puerto Rico Energy Forum Article Roundup, and that summarizes, or perhaps it's the other way around, the Puerto Rico Energy in 60-minute segment summarizes the newsletter where we lay out a lot of the articles that we referenced during the conversation and a little bit of analysis and reflections from the conversation we had with Ignacio. That will also be published, if not today, later this week, specifically on LinkedIn, but we'll link to it in our emails. If you're not on our emails and would like to be, send us a note or send Javier Velez, who's our producer, editor, all things admin on the chat right now with your email so that we can include you in all of our correspondence. And I also encourage everybody to follow us on LinkedIn and on social media. We give a lot of updates on those platforms and including links to be able to join the conversation as we did today. So with that being said, again, thank you for joining us. And the Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes segment is going to formalize quite a bit this year. We also have two other segments. One is the Power Hour segment, which is the most informal of our get-togethers, and it also takes place at 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening, Puerto Rico time, and we unpack a specific topic of the day. We didn't do one here for January, so we'll kick that off in February, and I'm forgetting on who our guest is for that, but it's we've got a great slate of participants for February. Tom and Javier, you guys can help me out there. We also have, of course, our general forum, which is the last Tuesday of the month, and that's today. So this is our first one of the year. And in addition to our segments, and I'll introduce our guest here in a moment for today's conversation, but in addition to our three segments, we will be launching a website. We'll be launching this newsletter. As I mentioned, we'll be launching a blog so that you can get regular news updates and analysis on what's happening in Puerto Rico energy. We also have a couple of workshops going on this year, specifically related to working groups, issue groups that we've formed. Two at the moment. One is around microgrid development in Puerto Rico that Tom is leading at the moment, and we're always looking for additional participants to offer your perspective, offer your experience, and thoughts about how do we advance microgrid development on the island. The other one is around the circular economy. And Agustín, we're going to talk a little bit about this, given your experience with the Solid Waste Authority, and what can happen with regards to the circular economy, what needs to happen to push it forward, and what are the potential barriers that we might see. That circular economy conversation started around end-of-life management for solar panels and has evolved to also include biogas, landfill natural gas, a variety of other ways that we can convert waste streams that exist on the island or could exist on the island into something valuable. And these, I think, reflect the broader interest that the Energy Forum has when we think about what does energy mean, and trying to take on board a whole variety of perspectives that you might not get in other conversations. So again, thank you all for being here. We're really looking forward to the conversation. And with that, I think we will get
Yeah,
started talking another note.
let me get, so I'm the color man. To my lead here, Sam. So yeah, look, I was just going to add, we membership is open. So if you're not a member, if you're a nonprofit, government, membership is free. Just tell us, we'll bring you in. You'll be able to participate in the groups. We keep things low. Individual memberships is $100 for a year. Company memberships is 500. There's lots of other opportunities. We do, we need support for this. The foundation is backing my time and other people's working on this, but we want this to grow. We want membership to grow. We want people to feel that they belong. The other thing, before Sam introduces Augustine, I wanted to add that we've got James Ellsmore here with us from Island Innovation, and I promised him a couple of minutes at the beginning. James runs, this is a global organization looking at islands and climate change and the impacts, and Puerto Rico is certainly one of those. And he's got a conference coming up in May in St. Kitts that could definitely benefit from higher participation from Puerto Rico, and the topics are quite quite opposite for Puerto Rico in terms of climate funding. So maybe James, thanks for joining us. A couple of minutes before we get started, maybe introduce yourself and what's going on.
Thanks so much for the invite, Thomas, and thanks, Sam, for bringing this great group together. Really appreciate it. Thomas, I owe you an email about the partnership for the summit. We'll be in touch soon. But
Yeah.
we'd love to see a great presence from Puerto Rico at the event, and I think will be a great opportunity to see what other islands in the Caribbean region are doing when it comes to sustainable energy, circular economy, and other sustainable development issues. So the event will be hosted not too far away in St. Kitts and Nevis. I believe there's a direct flight from San Juan, so easy trip. And this is our flagship event hosted by Island Innovation, each year on a different continent. So last year was in the province of Prince Edward Island in Canada. The year before was in Madeira in Portugal, and we're really excited this year to be bringing it to the Caribbean. So anyone in Puerto Rico, we'd love to discuss with you how we can involve the island in this event, as there'll be a lot of stakeholders from across the Caribbean. And specifically, there will be a forum, which is quite a mouthful, on subnational island jurisdictions and climate funding. So what does that mean? How do territories like Puerto Rico access funding to adapt to climate change? And Puerto Rico is not the only place with these challenges. There's the UK overseas territories like the British Virgin Islands, the Dutch territories like Aruba and Curacao. So there'll be a number of territories from around the Caribbean that don't fit into the COP Paris Agreement UN system, but have all the challenges of other Caribbean states when it comes to climate change and adaptation and energy systems. And so we'll be looking at private sector finance solutions particularly, and hopefully we'll be having a speaker from the CARICOM Climate Fund, when they're looking at how the territories in the region can access that funding. Obviously, for many of you, how that will play into funding energy adaptation and resilience, but also it's beyond just the energy sector. So that's the Climate Resilience and Finance Forum. So I think it will be a great opportunity for anyone that's interested. I'll put my information and a link to the Global Sustainable Island Summit in the chat. Really excited to be partnering with you all and with the great work that you're doing with the Puerto Rico Energy Forum. Yes, hopefully we'll be able to showcase some of the actions that are happening in Puerto Rico, and make those connections to other islands in the Caribbean that are having many of the same challenges, many of the same solutions when it comes to the energy transition.
Great. Thanks, James. I know you're in the middle of a team offsite, but yeah, if you can stick around for a while, that'd be great. I think you'd appreciate what we do, and certainly what Agustin has to say. So
I should
thanks
have
very
said
much.
hello from another Spanish-speaking island, Gran Canaria, in the Canary Islands here,
Yeah.
with how they're doing renewables. So I'll send some notes. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
Awesome.
it, James. And I think this is a it's very much in line with everything we're trying to do here. And I mentioned the workshops that we're doing around microgrid development and the circular economy. Engaging with other islands helps us understand what leadership role Puerto Rico can play, not just within the Caribbean, but with regards to other geographical jurisdictions that otherwise look relatively similar. So thanks, James, again. And I see you put your contact information and information about the summit in the chat. I encourage everybody to take a look at that. I think without further ado, actually, there is one more further ado, which is I've recalled what it is that we're going to be doing in February. We're going to be speaking to two women who know quite a bit about energy. One is Heather Reams, who leads the Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions organization. It's a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. that Tom's also involved in. And they coalesce particularly a Republican caucus around how they can have better energy policy. And given Republicans control the executive and legislative branches in Washington, it'll be insightful to understand what are they thinking with regards to their priorities for this next term, particularly 2 years in Congress, but also 4 years in the Trump administration. We're also going to be speaking with Crystal Allen for the Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes segment. Crystal is the CIO of Luma and is deeply involved. She's been there 2 years now, and she's deeply involved in the implementation of IT, OT, and cybersecurity in the Puerto Rico grid. And that's everything from making sure the electrons flow to making sure that they flow securely. And so that's going to be another great conversation. Now we have no further ado. Agustin was served as the secretary of the Solid Waste Authority from 2013 to 2014. He was the chairman of the Puerto Rico Energy Commission, the predecessor to the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau from 2014 to 2017. He led energy transition in Puerto Rico for the EDF from 2019 to 2022. And most recently served with Secretary Granholm as the key liaison for grid transition and modernization in Puerto Rico. And that's going to be the main focus of our conversation today. So Agustin, welcome to the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Tom, for this invitation. I'm really honored to be part of this first set of series of video conferences for 2025.
Well,
Welcome.
it was the timing was right. You're getting out of your role with the political transition in Washington. We wanted to catch you before you head to Southeast Asia and reflect on, while it's still fresh on mind, what's happened in the last couple of years. And I think that's probably the best place to start. Broad impressions on the work that your office and the DOE was able to accomplish, barriers, challenges, key lessons learned. What do you think when you reflect on the last 2 years of your work between Washington and the island?
First of all, I think there's been a lot of presence, unprecedented, I guess, from the secretary's office to be in Puerto Rico. She came here 10 times to the island, and she put a lot of effort. I've never seen that before. I remember working when I was at the PREB with DOE, but remember that DOE, the PREB has primary and exclusive jurisdiction on energy matters on the island. So usually DOE will provide technical support or anything that we needed to make our work much more efficient and better. So we had interactions with DOE before, but not to the extent that we had these last 2 years. I was based here in Puerto Rico as well as a few other of my colleagues. I thought that gave an important presence in Puerto Rico as to what DOE could do to them and what kind of technical support they could provide, as well as funding opportunities. I think that we never had the luxury or opportunity to use, such as the Energy Resiliency Fund and access to the DOE's Loans Programs Office. So I think those were two major opportunities that we were able to see in the last 2 years that we never had that luxury before, other than the other, technical support that is usually provided through the national labs. So I mean, for me, it was a blessing too that we were able to monitor and try to cut the red tape of the hard bureaucracy of all the processes that go through the federal and state side when you have to approve projects for the reconstruction of the grid after Hurricane Maria.
I think there's a broader question when it comes to what does energy transition mean on the island. Of course, we have the long-term 2050 horizon, the Energy Advisory Committee that Governor Gonzalez has formed, as well as some legislative changes that are coming down the pike, have suggested getting rid of some of the getting rid of the intermediary goals in that transition to renewable. So part of it is, I think, the generation mix needs to transition, but also the transition to just reliable, stable transmission and distribution. And you've been working with energy transition, not just with the DOE, but with EDF prior to that in Puerto Rico. How do we tease apart these priorities? How do we understand the order of operations that need to happen here? And in the absence of intermediary renewable energy goals, what do we track for that transition? I mean, a lot of people want to see fewer outages and lower cost of energy. And I think those are obvious metrics, but what may be some non-obvious metrics to understand the energy transition, and what have you been thinking about specifically over the last several years to say, okay, that's progress in the right way?
Yeah, I think this is complex, but at the same time, it has to be seen holistically. One of the major hurdles that I think is affecting everything is the bankruptcy of PREPA. I think that's probably the key of everything. We thought 10 years ago that we were going to resolve that issue. We actually, when I was at the PREP, we were able to issue a resolution on approving the restructuring service agreement and approving what was going to be an exchange of new debt, and restructuring the old debt to something better that probably was going to be much more affordable than what it looks like it's going to be, because as time passes by, those interests are going up dramatically. So what we'll see at the end, I think it's going to be much more different than we thought 10 years ago. And I think that was going to be key, just to have more access to new capital. And one thing we were trying to do with the way we structure the PREB was to make sure that we had the ratings that Puerto Rico needed, so that we could be in a better position for to access new capital. And I'm a little bit concerned that if you do major changes on those structures that have been here for 10 years, where there is some respect for the progress and work that has been done and the analysis that has been put out with entities who have high reputation in Wall Street and the financial markets, I think that could be something to look up to, or to watch, because otherwise, I mean, if they try to make huge changes, I think they're not seeing the whole picture, and that's one of my huge concerns. I remember when I used to work with a chief restructuring officer in Puerto Rico, she said that one of the biggest problems Puerto Rico was facing is that some CEOs lack the understanding. When I'm referring to CEOs, I'm referring to PREPA, lack the understanding of financial markets when that's key for everything they do. And I remember before we had a lot of pressure by the industry to get into wheeling regulations and to try to expedite all the regs that you could possibly think, but we always said we have to do it in order. And the first thing we need to make sure it happens is that we complete the bankruptcy proceedings and issue something, a resolution that could work. Right after Promesa, everything changed, as you know, and then all the negotiations were back to square one, as they have happened recently with the recent decisions by the First Circuit Court of Appeals. So I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, I think that should be a super priority for the rest to follow through and be expedited. But again, as I said, it's holistic approach is needed. There's a lot of things that we need to do. In the meantime, we are prone to more hurricanes in Puerto Rico. We need to save lives. We need to work more with DGs and putting rooftop solar and storage in houses to help those vulnerable people survive in an event of a similar hurricane like Maria. In addition to making sure that we have a grid that is compatible with the penetration of renewables that is happening in Puerto Rico, which it's right now around 140,000 households are interconnected to the grid. So that's why it's a complex mix, and I'm hoping that this is a priority in the next couple of months to try to expedite finishing up the bankruptcy negotiations, and we can pass that page. When we do that, I think everything will fall into place, and then we can continue regulating other things that are extremely important. So that's why it has been so difficult, because we had to do with not limited resources, limited staff, or limited knowledge, many things at the same time, like rate case, EIRPs, a hurricane, microgrid regulations, wind regulations. It's just too much when we're lacking the biggest piece of the puzzle.
It's something that Tom and I
Amen.
talk all the time about, and in fact, the Energy Forum is going to be publishing an article later this afternoon that Tom wrote called "It's the Bankruptcy Stupid," because it is fundamental to a cascading series of benefits that, without getting out of that under that rain cloud, the cost of capital that you mentioned was one of the key problems. Your counterparty risk. Attracting investors to do large-scale projects, whether it's industrial or utility scale or whatever it may be, ends up becoming very challenging. LUMA's access to working capital, the reliability of partners coming in and saying, yeah, this is a place that's trending in the right direction. One of the things that you mentioned is the Energy Bureau's capacity to regulate. It's another thing that we've talked about recently, and something that's going to be coming out of the Gonzalez administration is hardening the Bureau's regulatory but also punitive capacity as an independent bureau, as one of the first legislative projects that she has announced, also in line with the Energy Advisory Committee that she's formed. When we reflect on the last 10 years, I think it's easy to pick out the Independent Energy Bureau as one of the greatest success stories of this energy transition. And that brings us to a recent conversation you and I had out in Aguadilla, Agustín, with regards to Act 10 and the importance of having that Independent Energy Bureau moving forward, truly independent of other legislative projects that may in other ways support or detract from energy transitions. When you think about what's coming forward for the Energy Bureau, are you an optimist about their ability to advance some of these key priorities that you just laid out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always confident of their work. They have the capacity, and there's more knowledge. I mean, they've been alive for 10 years now, and there's people there who has worked for at least 6 years. One thing that I really I'm happy with how everything has evolved is that they kept the same consultants we hired 10 years ago, and that gives consistency and also credibility of the work they're doing. And you can see that through the different resolutions coming out. You see an evolution on the integrated resource planning process, which is delayed right now, but I think it's going to be key to whatever happens at the legislative side. I have no idea what the governor is planning to propose, but I mean, those processes could be fast-tracked and passed by the legislature, but at the same time also could create a lot of public attention, and if public could be involved in the process of the hearings, I think we can improve whatever is missing or whatever we need to do. I think we always understood that the targets, the middle targets for 2025 were going to be a little bit hard to accomplish because of all these other externalities that are happening. But I'm a little bit concerned that you use that legislature to change every time something doesn't work for the administration. And I think that they have to, that has to be really carefully well thought. I don't see a champion right now in the legislature who can really take over like it happened before. I mean, before there were a couple of legislators who really knew what they were trying to do, and they look outside political boundaries. I think remember Larry Selheimer, for example. He would call everyone. He would call me. He would call anyone who could have something to add into what they were planning to do on Act 17. And I think they pretty much left the essence of Act 57 the way it was. They actually improved. I think we were able to see some problems with Act 57 back then. I think Act 17 improved the way it was. It was drafted, and I like the approach they took, because again, as I said, this is a holistic issue, and climate change also is part of the problems that we're facing, and why we need to have a sustainable energy future in Puerto Rico. I have no idea what's their vision, what the new administration's vision is for Puerto Rico regarding fines and all that. I mean, remember, if you increase fines, those fines will be passed through customers. I don't think that's actually something that's going to work better for us. At the end, the customers will have to pay for any huge penalties, unless there's a restriction by the Bureau, which I think they have done before, that they shouldn't pass through those penalties through us. But again, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily a huge solution to the problem. There's bigger issues. This is much bigger than I think people think. People think that Luma is just doing nothing, when indeed they are working so hard to push their priority projects forward. But there's a process for those things. I mean, you don't buy a battery at utility scale in the supermarket. You just need to, sometimes you need to build some of these units, and those things takes time to build a new generating asset. It'll take about 5 years. It's just impossible to substitute, for example, because was supposed to be planned way before. I mean, we are up to 2027 really soon, and getting that they will have to change the law to allow AES to extend their time using, burning coal, which creates another series of problems. I don't think even the company was ready for that. But again, I think we lack the urgency, and I think that's something we, from the DOA perspective, we're always pushing hard, as is the urgency of things, and I think that's the main issue. So I'll be paying attention to what the new administration proposes. I like the idea that they are that they have a committee with diverse people with different mindsets and different backgrounds, and I think that could help make better recommendations before there is actually a bill in process or sent to the legislature in Puerto Rico.
Can I ask a quick, more of a federal question than kind of the domestic one, but the PRE 100 study generally been well received. Long time coming. Some complaints about why couldn't it be done? Why couldn't you release certain things sooner to help guide people? And it's particularly when you start thinking about microgrids or integration or other types of things. But overall, very positive, very helpful. I don't think it shrank from the challenges and identifying. I mean, it may have been a little bit diplomatic in the wording, but talked about how do you get to these targets, how do you get to 100, how do you get there by 2050, etc. It's great. But the real question is, I've seen it come up now more and more in the side conversations, right? When the PREB and when Luma and other people are working on the IRP, it's mentioned every other thing when they're thinking about what's doing and what's being proposed, etc. Was it intended when it was formulated that this was something deliberately done to provide political cover for people to work and act, because it is actually functioning that way, and it's actually, I think, having a very positive effect in sort of calming some of the loud disruptive voices on kind of either end, and allowing people to at least focus a bit more on getting things done and finding more optimal solutions for Puerto Rico in the short and medium term than there were before. So I know you were involved in that and the thinking and whatnot. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about how you guys thought it was going to work, or whether this is just a nice bonus. So
I mean, I'm glad to hear that what you're saying. I think I thought, because this is the PR 100 is a guidance, I guess, to Puerto Rico as to how to achieve 100% renewable energy. It's not binding, and it's up to PREB, and we were trying to make sure that they use this also as a tool in their modeling and the different, and of course take advantage of the technical assistance that DOA can provide to even the PREB in this process. I think I mean, our goal was that Luma would use this as a baseline for their proposal. I haven't seen the details of all that they will be proposing, and of course they've asked for an extension of time, and we'll see what's proposed. I think usually in the last two IRPs, we've seen what comes out is completely different. It's a modified IRP or substantially modified IRP. We'll see how that will play out this third IRP coming up soon. But the idea was to use all of this, and that other entities as interveners could have a protection or something to rely on that they could use to support the different arguments that will be coming out in this process. that's why this process is so important, because there's so many interveners, and I beg people. For example, I begged EDF, which I used to work before. Say, you guys have to make sure that you be again interveners, and reserve some funding for hiring good experts to put out the right arguments and make sure that nothing deviates from our main goal of achieving 100% renewable energy. And when I say that, is I'm afraid of building stranded assets, for example. And I think that's something that we stress a lot when I was at EDF, that we needed to make sure that we're not building just to please people, that there's new assets when indeed those assets are not the solutions that we all wanted for the future of a cleaner Puerto Rico. And again, and there's issues of EPA compliance with SO2, and other things like that. I think that need to be integrated as part of the discussion. I don't know if that's being discussed, but I think that's key, because that's an enforcement matter that will be it will be out there in front of Genera for at least, and
Yeah.
a little bit concerned of how the non-attainment issues of SO2 in the San Juan area could drive decisions for that IRP, and they have to be discussed in detail by people who have the expertise to discuss those issues.
Yeah.
So that's why we need a robust group of interveners from all sides, because we need not only the enviros, but also from the technical side, the economic sectors. They need to all put together their seed, and put and have the bureau in the position to make the right decisions. And indeed, I think I would say that we were pleased about maybe 70% of what we argued within with EDF and other nonprofits that were participating in the IRP were integrated in the modified version of the IRP. That's why
Yeah.
I'm that's my comfort zone, I guess. I think going back to your question, it's the importance of having this document is just a tool. It's not perfect, but I think it has so many great input from over hundreds of people local in Puerto Rico, the University of Puerto Rico. There were so many advisors to that document in different stages, that I think it makes it so transparent, and that's the whole purpose of how this whole process works. I mean, we never seen this in a local agency. We were pioneers in making sure we had a process that was not only transparent, but I mean, it's just that it was conducted in both English and Spanish, resolutions in both Spanish, English, and Spanish. You don't see that in any local agency at all. I mean, it's really hard to find a resolution for something that's happening, for example, at the Department of Natural and Environmental Resources. You lose track, and we have that so structured and so documented that I think people can relate back, and that's something I think people should do. It's look back at the first IRP, second IRP, before they get jump into the third IRP, and start commenting on what are the best options. But I mean, I hear a lot of people saying, well, we need to do this, we need to build this, build that. That's not that easy, and it creates so many other problems logistically. And of course, you're saying that because politically they have to just try to leave the prep alone. I think they have they have the authority to do what they do, but they now have the capacity also to be able to make decisions that are going to be the best for the island.
Yeah,
So-
no,
so let me-
that's great. I think just to round up, and we'll get back to Sam's, is that I think it's having a salutary effect, right? As I said before, and if when Luma talks about this, and presumably the Preb, they actually, first of all, they are talking about attainment zones, right? And and there may be different issues, like the move, at least in the transition, the interim, to a lot more gas, and then feeding out getting rid of oil and getting rid of coal. You end up potentially with a different issue, right? You end up with a NOx issue primarily more than an SO2 issue. So the SO2 largely goes away within a certain period of time, but but they're talking about it, right? It's part of the discussion about when we can do things, where we do them, etc. And of course, nobody talked about it in the last time it went through. And the other thing that they're doing, and this is again where the PR 100 study comes in, is they're talking about, sometimes, in accordance with the way that things thought about as the PR 100 study. In some ways, they're using it a bit like a Bible, which maybe they shouldn't. But in the other way, when they're making decisions and they're deviating from some of the things that happen, they're all forced to be transparent and explain the reason that this isn't, we're not planning for this to happen, right? So large scale, utility scale, grid connected solar, as opposed to battery energy storage, is largely diminished in almost all of the cases. It has almost everything to do with the cost they must assume for this, and then the difficulty of getting it online and putting it in. It doesn't rule it out. It's just saying right now we can't do this because we have to have price and timing and funding and all these other considerations. And so, the fact that it's there is forcing people to actually explain what they're doing. So, I think this is a beneficial effect that maybe people weren't thinking about when they put the study together in the first place. So
I am blessed to hear that,
yeah.
Tom. I thought at some point I thought they were going to discard what we were doing, because of course there's those egos of, I do have you could think that an entity have the exclusive jurisdiction on something and they do whatever, but I'm glad that's the way it worked out. At the end, that's the biggest legacy probably of what we did at DOE, and we'll see that once the process starts, we'll see how that interplays in the discussion. I'm looking forward. I mean, I want to be part of it in some capacity, hopefully as an intervener, because I think it's so important to make sure that all these considerations take place, and now that we can all work together.
Yeah.
One of the beauties of it, I remember when I was an intervener, is that I was discussing with other parties, things that we could argue, or things we forgot to include in our arguments, and some other organizations, because they lack standing to participate, they use our channel to communicate those things. And again, the other thing that I thought it was interesting, that not only interveners but all the others that participated as friends of the court through an amicus briefs, they had a huge impact on what people were writing as interveners. And again, if you don't have standing to intervene, maybe through putting out a comprehensive paper or something into the record, that could make a huge difference, because people will rely on that as part of the discussion and the different filings that they will be making. So that for me was strange. I've never seen that before, but I love to see. I love how everything was evolving from the beginning to what happened, and I look forward for this third one, because I think it's going to be a much richer process. There's people with much more knowledge. They've worked this with IRPs for the last 10 years, and I think we'll have a better final product that I think it should please everyone. But we'll have to see how it develops. And I can't wait for that to happen. I was looking forward to see that during my time at DOE, but I'm actually happy that I can have a better opportunity to work much more into the process, being outside of the department right now.
Well,
So
we'll look
let me
forward for
offer
you
a
coming
different.
back with a tan. So
Of course. Yeah.
Let me offer another thought about the PR 100 study and play a little bit of devil's advocacy here, which is that I think that the sub headline is that there are enormous challenges to achieving the 100% renewable goal, not least of which is cost and technological. And I think one of the other key conclusions was that the intermediary goals will likely not be met, at least not the 2025 one, which I think everyone agrees with. And is why I think the Energy Committee that Jennifer Gonzalez has gathered has made that recommendation. It's part of a broader set of expectation management of how do we achieve these and what are the implications with achieving these goals, and setting realistic goals for the middle and long-term horizons. One of my maybe just highlighted disconnects is that the IRP project or process is a 3 to 5 year thought process. The political one is 3 to 5 years. If on average, and if we're lucky, 7 to 9, right? And so particularly now without the immediate intermediary goals, what is going to be the driving force for using the PR 100 study that inherently has a longer horizon to think what are the political incentives for the Energy Bureau, which is not a political body, but exists within the acts on the will of the legislature, the legislative body that does exist on a political time cycle, the governor who has a sense of urgency, or anybody should have a sense of urgency with saying, okay, we're in crisis mode, we need to address immediate energy needs, and this longer term, and I don't mean this in a derisive way, but academic project of looking at how do we achieve and what are the implications of achieving these longer horizon goals. That seems like a disconnect that almost makes it feel like you can use the study for whatever you'd like. You can use it to say it's not going to be nearly as easy as you anticipate, or look, it's possible. And those are obviously competing messages.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the entire goal of it is that it's 100% possible that we achieve the goal by 2050, but there's all these externalities that we have to deal with, and I guess one of the major areas is making a better grid to make sure that it can absorb the penetration that I think we're envisioning. And the way the IRP works, it's like in a 5 years action plan, because every 3 years you revise the IRP, and there's new technology that will be advancing in that process. And of course, we cannot lock in something today and say this is the recipe for success, because we'll see advances in technology coming up in every 5 years or so, every year pretty much. But that's why the process is designed to be revised every 3. But we just need to be careful not to pick solutions that then become stranded assets, and then become a bigger problem, because of course to get the return of investment for those huge assets, I guess, will be there for a long time, and the transition could take longer. So that's why they need to be well interconnected. I mean, the short-term and the long-term plans, but we need to understand that there's some immediate needs that I guess are the hardest ones. And then we have all the issues right now with federal funding, how that will impact the restructuring of the grid with those funds, and hopefully I mean, we can continue to use those funds, and it could not, and they're not clawbacked by the federal government. But and as Tom and I we were discussing before this call, it's just that every day there's a new announcement, new executive order, which changes, I guess, the way we are doing business with the federal government, and I guess that's going to be extremely important at the end, when we start making decisions in the short term and the long term. But I mean, I'm so happy to hear that. I guess this is part of the discussion in the background, that the Pier 100 it recognizes all these challenges, or recognize all these challenges that could easily impact the final solution.
I think that there's a key linkage between the short and the long term thought processes here, and it's something that we talked to Marisol Bonet about on in a panel at an event we hosted back in September on the future of energy demand here in Puerto Rico. And to your point about stranded assets, making sure that we're building infrastructure today that meets long-term needs and is cognizant of where those trend lines are going is something that should be the key metric for accountability when it comes to public officials, to say, okay, is this going to be not just meeting the immediate emergency and crisis that we're in, but is it going to be valuable as part of the long-term strategy, the transition, and then the final goal, as you said. So I guess one question on that: where do you see energy demand going over the next 25 years as we approach that longer term horizon? The PR 100 study suggests that it's going to go down. That gives me grave concern. Not that that was the conclusion that was drawn, but that may be the reality. Where do you see these trend lines moving?
No idea. And of course, I just want to make a disclaimer that I'm talking on behalf of myself, not a DOE or any of my.
Right.
It's just everything that I've said is public information that is out there. Nothing. It's privilege. Or attorney client work product. But it's hard to say. You know, it's hard to measure. It's 25 years is a long time. Anything could happen. We could get in 10 years an incredible incentive where could attract new industries to Puerto Rico, and then we will have an increase in demand. That's a possibility, but it's hard to say. But I guess if you just follow the trends that are happening right now, or the way we've seen how the demand it's reacting in the last 10 years, it's reasonable to make that conclusion. But again, it's hard to predict at the end, because there's so many other things that could happen in the middle, which are out of our control, and we don't know that. So again, we have continue to see people leaving the island, continue to see big companies or entities in industries leaving as well. That then you lose demand in those ways, and I guess that's why again we need that economic input into the equation. Sometimes we forget to think about how that's an important player, why it's important to find equity, or I guess something that is affordable energy to all Puerto Ricans, including the manufacturing side, because otherwise you are pushing them out of the island, and I think sometimes they feel that they're not part of the discussion. They feel that they don't understand what's going on. They do acknowledge that they like the formula of having a private entity running the T&D and generation side, but there has to be much more communication as to how those improvements are benefiting their industry. And I think that we have to think that the industry plays a huge part of the economic side in Puerto Rico because of all the money they
This goes back to the bankruptcy too, right? I mean,
Correct.
it's
Correct.
it's one thing to have a system where the prices are high, right? And how do we deal with that? What's the long-term plan? How do we accommodate investment and growth, et cetera? It's another when you add this whole bucket of uncertainty in just about everything. And solving the bankruptcy is step one. New capital, unleashing. If you can show that that federal money that's sitting on the sidelines, that can't be used because you've got no way of spending money in order to create the conditions to get the money back. Once you solve that and people see that happening, you're gonna generate belief. You're gonna generate investment. You're gonna generate a lot of things. So, it's an algorithm that has yet to be written, really, with regards to Puerto Rico. But we all agree, we should all agree that trends toward economic growth, more energy justice, everything. There's going to be pockets, there's going to be changes, there's going to be arguments, but that's a
Well,
big deal.
and we're also talking about an audience here, energy users here that do not care about the long term in the same way that we can postulate. They want to come home from work today and have energy at their homes and get an energy bill on the 1st of February that is reflective of what of the value they think they're getting. And this goes to the energy demand is that
Yeah.
some of these, even if it's a 3 to 5 year plan, will cause defection, right? Either defection from the grid, in which case they'll find more efficient ways of producing their own power, which was why we have such a robust residential solar market, and why we have such a robust industrial microgrid market, because those two sectors are basically saying we're going to do it ourselves, and we actually, because of the uniqueness of this market, we can pay less for more, and we're going to do that. And so that's on the short-term defection. And the long-term defection is I'm going to leave, right? And this goes to your point, Agustín, that there's an out-migration, there's an exodus of some businesses because of some of the high cost of daily operations, whether it's daily operations in your life or daily operations in your business. And so I think Tom and I have talked a lot about a J curve here, right? But we will see at some point when the stabilization is achieved that these trends plateau and hopefully reverse, and also drive economic growth, right? That's the nature, and economic growth models depend on technological progress, which we're in the midst of, and population growth, which we need to realize. So those are two trends, and without either, we're going to be in a very tough situation. I know that we're coming up on the hour. I've got one more question, and I alluded to this at the beginning with regards to your experience at the Solid Waste Authority. Puerto Rico has tried waste to energy projects in the past. I think particularly when you were there was a series of challenges, not least of which is legal and environmental. What is the role for, and this was not so much covered, at least in the first half of the horizon in the PR 100 study, but what is the role, as far as you see it, of waste to energy, waste conversion, gasification projects in Puerto Rico, and are those viable? Is that something that we can expect to come on?
Yeah, that's probably a question for DNER, who's now the taking the lead on everything solid waste related. We've seen it. I mean, it's not the way it worked when 10 years ago, when we had I don't know, maybe 30 people working at the Solid Waste Authority. I think that now there's not even that, maybe 10 people. There's no recruitment. I think they're forgetting they're part of this discussion again. As I said at the beginning, this is holistic, and we need to think about other solutions. And again, I see them also from the climate perspective. I see them as ways to mitigate climate change, and that's the approach I took back then. Let's capture methane, for example, at landfills, and there is a need for the department, I guess, or program regarding solid waste at DNER to do their planning. I think I was using a plan for resources that updated a couple years before I joined the Solid Waste Authority more than 10 years ago. So they need to look back at what are the different options, whether those are reasonable options. We live in a small island. We don't have land to continue expanding landfills. We need to look at a circular economy approach. Now we have the issue of what do we do with roof solar panels and its disposal. It's highly toxic. Our landfills are not designed for that type of waste, and we just need to look for solutions that are much more aggressive. What are those? I think I will defer that to DNER. That's why it's important to have someone who understand that holistic approach and how that interacts with PREPA. That's sort of how I started getting involved with the utility, because there were a couple of projects that were proposed in Puerto Rico, and of course, I guess the way they proposed them were not probably the right or legal way of doing things. I never agreed. I consulted with external parties to think what would be the best solutions for those, but in the order of how do you manage waste, that's definitely an option, and I guess it has to be considered. And I would like to say that if it's considered, but that there's new technology that it didn't exist 10 years ago, and I think we need to look for options, but of course thinking that we need to use the order, reusing things first, and recycling before we look for other options. And I think there's a market for that as well, an opportunity for new green jobs in Puerto Rico, and I think we haven't exploded that. We have a new breed of people now at the DDEC. I think those are important key players. They have a different mindset. I would love to engage more with them as well, just to see how they integrate these solutions as part of the economic development of Puerto Rico, and integrate that into the energy solutions, because they're all going to be related. I've seen this at a really small scale in Culebra, and I like the way they've sort of approached the solutions, because they're thinking also about composting and other different things within the equation, and using solar as part of their process to save money, and I think we just need to do this at a bigger scale. And there's this group called Generación Circular that I think it's trying to put out what would be a path for Puerto Rico's solid waste future.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We should reach out to Generación Circular, because as I mentioned at the beginning, we're engaging in white paper development and regular conversations about how do we advance the circular economy on the island, and if we can kill a couple of birds with a single stone here, as well as drive economic development forward by inviting the technologists and the investors and the people who can operate these conversion facilities, that's growth, right? And it's creativity, and it's potential for regional and national leadership with regards to figuring it out. So and technology development. Agustín, one quick final question for you. Are you an optimist for the energy sector in the island or not? And can you briefly say why?
Totally, I am. I think I've seen it grow so fast. I'm seeing so many players that are so active in looking for solutions, and how we all interact with each other. There's a lot of respect, even if there could be disagreements. I think there's a lot of respect to all our colleagues that are working together. I am happy that the governor is doing what she's doing, convening a diverse group of professionals. who have expertise in the topic. This is a priority for her. This is a priority for the resident commissioner. It's that's why I see it as something positive. DOE is very committed to work in Puerto Rico. It's working in Puerto Rico. They still have staff working in the island. That's huge. I mean, that didn't happen 10 years ago. So I'm very optimistic. I can't wait. This is a long fight. It's a big marathon. And that's what I said to Secretary Granholm before I left. It's just that I feel that we need to continue fighting. I mean, it's not the fight is not over. We need to continue to do what we do and help educate others to make sure we have the best decisions for the benefit of all the citizens of Puerto Rico.
That's the perfect note to end on. Agustín, thank you very much for sharing your insights and being a part of the Puerto Rico Energy Forum.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor, and thank you, Tom, and Sam, for inviting me to start this year with some optimistic vision of what could happen in the future. And I will be around. I'm just going to take a little break, do a reset, but then I'll be back soon, and I'll meet with you all, and we'll continue to think about what are the best solutions to move forward.
Excellent.
That'd be
Safe
great.
travels. Enjoy yourself, and we'll touch base with you later this year.
Thank you so much. Take care.